Holing putts is obviously important to shoot good scores, but the problem is there's usually too many thoughts going on. For one, we're having to read greens, just put that aside for a second. But having a reliable technique, just at least one important technique thought can make all the difference. And very rarely do I say, let's see what the pros do, but I'm going to show you something very easy, very trainable that you can use that the pros do to hole more 8, 10 footers. It's going to give you something systematic, something reliable. Let's get into it. Putting is an art. There's no way to hole every single putt, but we can control some of it. Now, some things we can't control is, we've got a pin here on a par 3 where it's at the front of the green, and you can see lots of pitch marks because it's only like a 9 iron, 8 iron for most people. So there's things that we can't control, having bad bumps along the road. But what we need to ensure that we do is number 1, I want you to have a reliable setup. And I've got a video that talks about that, and I'll link that below. But having a reliable setup is crucial because it literally sets you up as you mean to go on. And being able to stick into that position or as close to it as frequently and as trustworthy as possible is going to help you have a more reliable stroke. So that's number 1. Number 2 is actually having a tweak to your arms, which we're going to get into, that is going to help the putter track along its path. Because too often we're kind of getting in our own way a little bit and we're trying to manipulate as we make a stroke. It has to be smooth and there can't be any manipulations or compensations as we're going through. And number 3, again, is about reliability, of course, but it's minimizing the amount of movement. The problem is a lot of you focus on the putter head and what this putter head is doing. And what that's going to do is create too much sort of wrist movement. So I'm going to give you a trick and an important calibration method, just like the Tour Pros, to hole those putts. All right, so we kind of took care of number 1, making sure that you hit the same setup with your feet, your weight balance. So you want at least sort of 60-70% in your left heel. You want the ball where your left or lead eye is just inside, basically the front of the putter, back of the ball, front of the putter, whichever you want to kind of look at. But those couple of things and being nice and tall is going to give you a much more reliable stroke. The second factor does relate to the setup, but it's basically talking about your arm position. Because we want to be able to turn around a pendulum here, it's not so much a rocking action, but we want to be able to track the putter with the least amount of resistance as possible. But for whatever reason, and I do it too, so this isn't just picking on you, we end up sort of stooping over a little bit, and especially if you're right hand dominant and you're playing right-handed, what can often happen is this right shoulder kind of takes over a little bit in the setup. It's almost like on top a little bit much. But that necessarily isn't the problem. Problem is that the lead arm sort of collapses. It kind of becomes weak. It starts to hide away a little bit. So it appears like this. And what's going to happen if I just allow my right side to kind of dominate? Yes, I'm exaggerating, so it's not going to quite look like this. But if I try and tuck in my arm here, I'm going to externally rotate it, not intentionally, but it just happens. And now my alignment is over this way, my eye line is going that way, and then I start feeling a bit skew-if. I don't know if that's a word technically, but skew-if. I'm now going to sort of try and manipulate my putt, and I'll end up sort of pushing it out. Because whether you realize it or not, you have the perfect ability to align up straight and make a nice straight putt with a decent stroke. But when we start getting a bit off, we have the ability to counteract it. And that's when we start focusing on the putter moving too much. We start to have manipulations, whether it's on the backswing or the through swing. So that's why these tips all connect to each other. Everything has to precede the one prior. So what do we do instead? It's very, very, very simple. And it actually really helps other facets of your game. And then we're going to go into that in another video. So what we're going to do, take the setup with your right hand, but with the left arm here, I want you to internally rotate it. Internal rotation is basically this. So I'm internally rotating my shoulder, so my elbow is pointing a little bit more that way, okay? If I just did this, my elbow is already going left to right. From this angle, you can see that if I allow my arm to tuck in this way, it's going to make me go over here, because that's almost where my elbow is leading me, right? If I internally rotate my shoulder, it's going to track a little bit more that way. So I have a little bit more room for my pendulum to move through. I'm not stuck in my own way. So it's very simple. All we need to do as we take the setup is just internally rotate that shoulder there, and then we can track the putter along its path. Not a great stroke, but it still went in because I was able very systematically to trust that my path is going to lead out that way. Now we get on to number 3. What I have here is the Hackmotion training aid. Whether you've got one or not, this is still going to benefit you because you can basically work on the same thing. It's just the Hackmotion is giving you very clear parameters and benchmarks which show you exactly what you are doing with your wrist movement here. So we have the putting feature. We're going to go to like the putting analysis, right? I've got it on my lead wrist. I've already calibrated it to save you the boredom. But what we're going to do, we're going to go to a benchmark. We're going to choose a benchmark, and these benchmarks are taken from tour players everywhere, all around the world, short putts, long putts. We're going to go for short putt adding radial. So what it says here is basically it's a short putt from a tour player, and there are changes in the wrist movements for longer putts, but really that's more about distance. But when we're hitting shorter putts, we want as much stability as possible. And you might think that stability comes from rocking your shoulders more. No, it comes from creating stability in your wrist action. So here we are, relatively short putt. What a lot of you do is have way too much movement on the way back. It's almost like you're allowing the putter to pass your hands and then flick it through. And again, that stems from what I mentioned at the beginning of the video, focusing too much on what the club head is doing. What I want you to pay more attention to is what the handle is doing, because that's your connection to the club. The club head will react to what's happening here. But it's just that intention changes a lot, because if you try and sort of putt with the hands, you sort of flip it through. We miss our benchmarks that we got here, but it's also very hard to stabilize the putter for accuracy, but very much so about distance. So instead of just saying, don't move the wrist, let's see what that really feels like. So we want to make sure our setup has enough of this extension, okay? And we're trying to match what they're suggesting of what the tour player does. He's obviously a good putter, and we're trying to match that pretty much there. But as I go back, I'm trying to maintain this wrist extension here. So I'm going to take my setup, I'm going to externally rotate my shoulder, and I'm going to try and maintain that putter going back. Now what we can see here, I missed it. Basically, address I had correct. At the top of the backswing, if you will, I was too extended, so my wrist was actually too far back this way. And at impact, I was too extended as well. So I, for whatever reason, added extension here. Maybe it's because I was trying to rock the shoulders a little bit too much or whatever, but it caused a missed putt. It actually created a left missed putt. So let's see if I can fare any better. So I'm going to try and get that setup correct. And I'm not really caring whether I hold the putts or not. I'm just trying to get the feels to understand of like, okay, that's where I need to be. So that's more or less my setup. There. So I'm much closer that time. I'm only 2 degrees extended at the top, more than what I should be, and 3 degrees at impact. So let me just try one more, and this calibrates me for what I need to do. So just a couple of minutes of this, you know, before I go out and play, or if I'm really working on my putting, I can just try and match what I need to do. Well, that did go in, but I missed my parameters a little bit. But it was all about keeping this stable and finding the mechanics within me to keep that stable. Now, what I wanted to point out as well was ulnar deviation. Ulnar deviation is basically this. It's that action here, okay? What I've been doing, I'm way too under. I've been doing a little bit too much, okay? So I need to try and match my ulnar deviation. Why does that matter? That matters because it's about how I'm delivering the putter here. If I don't have enough of this movement this way, it shows that I'm too much over the ball. So I'm getting a little bit stuck. Remember I said I was having some putts where I've got too much extension and rocking up a bit this way. That can actually stem from being too far over the putt, so I'm too crouched over, I've got too much extension here, and I'm literally stuck. I'm kind of stuck in my own way, so I have to go here, which creates the incorrect movement from that direction as well. So dialing it all back, everything connects, okay? So now, let's see if I can get this somewhat correctly, right? I'm going to stand a little bit taller. I'm going to try and keep that stable again. I'm going to externally rotate the shoulder here. I'm going to putt through. That was much better. That was a much better calibration. That was a much better putt. There was much more stability. So it might sound a little bit complicated, but the thing is, you realize it is minutia that we're working on, but the minutia can only work better when we've done the steps before with a reliable setup, with external rotation to help that putter glide without having to manipulate it. So piece all those things together and you will, I guarantee it, hole more putts. Now, if you want to get your own Hackmotion, you can save a lot of money by clicking the link below. And if you want to take not just your putting to the next level, but your entire short game, I want you to check out this practice game because it's really, I think I actually did it on this hole. So you can try the 21s game to improve your realistic, real life, game time short game. See you next time.